The sun's gonna be all right? You want me this side?
I think you're there.
If my transcript is showing up in B-roll right now, we're gonna have a problem, Graham. And then the doctor, explained to us, your father has multiple myeloma, he doesn't have very long to live. Look at my mom like, how do we not know this?
Why do you think he didn't want you to know?
I don't know. I certainly wept on that day sitting in my car going, you blew it, you blew it, you blew it. You're getting a lot of like the grit stuff or the, I don't know, sort of the edgy stuff. Who put it over the edge was his daughter, Riley, actually.
When you hear some of the industry analysts that came out when you came back saying, how can this guy help fix the problems he helped create, you think what?
Right now, where we are, I'm the right person at the right time to lead this company.
So I want to take you back to when you were a kid, growing up. How about best and worst part of being one of five boys?
Latchkey kid. One of five boys is different than being the youngest of that. My parents had been through it. My oldest brother's, he's a good 15 plus years older than me. And so Bill, Stuart, Scott, Colin, and then myself. And so Colin and I were only 2 years apart, but the rest of my brothers were, much bigger. So my parents, my mom, she was a working mom. My dad, he had a lot of business in Florida. He was a land developer, so he was always sort of popping around. And then my mom, she was the mayor of my town, and then she worked for the State Department as the Director of Intergovernmental Affairs and liaison with state and local government officials. See, I locked eyes when I said that for you, because she made me memorize basically that statement if I ever wanted to travel with her.
And this is also the 80s. She's a bit of a trailblazer,
oh,
right?
Without question.
It's not common for, a mother of five to be mayor of a town or, whatever.
Yeah, believe me, she's self-described, she's tough. And she carried that with her, but she always had a chip on her shoulder, and she's, forever, she, rest her soul, she passed away, a couple, 2+ years ago. But she was always the mayor of Kensington, 13 years as the mayor of our town where I grew up. And she loved it. She'd sit on her front porch and she'd wear a big hat and glasses, and she'd look at everybody walking by. And she was one of those people who just had the ability to always feel like when you were there in her presence, like welcome. It's like, and she'd always say things like, oh, I see you're wearing my color today. I'm like, I thought your color was turquoise, Jane. Like, no, I'll take pink too. She'll take a hot pink, she'll take this one, she'll take that one. But she could move easily through a conversation of talking about, her travels with my dad and living in Karachi to all the travel that she was lucky enough to take me on as a young kid. Because my brothers had kind of moved on. I was sort of the easy one that they needed a babysitter for. So she used to make me travel with her when she worked for the State Department.
And her idea of a vacation was to take you to some convention in some state somewhere, right?
Yeah, I can remember a couple times loading up the Country Square wagon and heading to the beach, where we'd stay in my grandmother's one-bedroom apartment down in Ocean City, Maryland, and there was 5 boys with one bedroom, so I got to sleep in the bed with the parents, and then one was in the bathtub, one was on the couch, 2 were on the floor. It was the way you just sort of lay it out. But yeah, she by the time I was in 12, 13, 10, 11, 12, she'd always travel me with her. So when she'd go to these conferences, in her role, she would basically represent the State Department at things like lieutenant governors' conventions, governors' conventions, and she was just a representative. So I had the ability to go down and meet all these kids from all over the country that would be in the, kind of the teenage, the group that they had for kids. And it really taught me, it was the first experience that taught me how to walk up to someone and stick my hand out and look them in the eye and just go, hi, my name's Kevin Plank. It's very nice to meet you, which is something I still do to this day. And one of my major pet peeves is people that are like, remember me? Huh? Remember? Like, God, just tell me your name. Why don't you just walk up and just tell me your name? And so I don't have to embarrass you. You don't have to embarrass me. Everybody feels awful when I go, can you please just help remind me? Instead, I can go, of course I remember you. Just stand up, grip it, and give me a hello.
Sophomore year, I believe you fail 2 classes in high school. Got into a drunken brawl, from what I understand. What's going on in your life then, and what happens from there?
Yeah, if my transcript is showing up in B-roll right now, we're gonna have a problem, Graham. But no, I actually found my high school transcript, and I was like, wow, this would be such a great story. And I'm like, actually, no one should ever see this and know
Oh,
that you
come
could do
on.
this poorly in school and actually do something other than ending up in a penitentiary somewhere.
Why do you think you didn't do well in school?
Probably didn't apply myself. I really grew up with this idea of I wanted to play ball. You know, I wanted to go play major college football. You know, I grew up with Sports Illustrated covers of Tony Dorsett running out from the cheerleaders at Pitt and being like celebrating. I loved the idea of being a gladiator in an arena, and I thought it was the highest high. I thought it was something that everybody wanted to do. And I didn't put two and two together. I was probably a pretty immature 14 or 15, and you know, it led to some life lessons. It was pretty good time to get your head straightened out when it gets kicked in.
Because it was Georgetown High
I went to
School
Georgetown
versus,
Prep.
Versus the actually Georgetown University football team,
Yeah,
right?
it was their Founders Day that they had at Georgetown University. But they had like open kegs of free beers, and so I was 15 years old, and we you know, had too many beers and got in trouble and learned a life lesson that had me, leave Georgetown Prep for a better place called St. John's in Washington, D.C., and one of the hardest things that I ever had to do, but one of those lessons that really helped shape me.
What does your mom say when you tell her you think you're getting kicked out and she wants to go talk to the father to try and convince him to let you stay?
Yeah, that was a pretty famous time. It was sort of like, you know, mild latchkey kid, but I traveled with my mom, and she was great. My parents were great. Like growing up, they did everything they were supposed to do, and I think they taught me independence, which is really important. But like, yeah, knowing that I was sort of like on the bubble, like what's going to happen at school, and I'm like, I got an appointment. I'm going to have to do summer school this summer, you know, in order to stay here. I had 4 brothers ahead of me that graduated from this place, you know. And I remember going to see this guy, Father Roach, who was the president of the school, the head priest. And, you know, he sat down and just said, you know, I'm here to tell you that we're going to be dismissing your son from Georgetown Preparatory School. And my mother was sort of like, what does this mean? How can this happen? I put 4 boys ahead of them before you. And then he sort of said, I'm sorry, but, you know, our decision is final. And my mother says to the priest, she says, you know, my gosh, even Peter had 3 chances. At which point I was sort of like, there's no way he's letting me back in. And I'm like, before he starts telling her the other 2 chances that I'd probably already blown, like, Mom, let's just get out of here. So go home, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the worst day of my life. And you know, by the time I got home, I'd had a call from the head coach at St. John's, and I was thinking, you know, what happens to me now? Do I go to, do I have to start going to work? Do I, you know, like life is over. And they called me, invited me to go join St. John's, and I'm like, Coach, can you get me? And he's like, we'll get you in. So I'll never forget my dad walking in the door that night, and you know, my mom like, let me talk to Dad. So he walks in, I just go, okay, Dad. I got some bad news, but I got some good news. I go, you know, the bad news, like, so I'm not gonna go to prep anymore, but St. John's called, and it's like half the tuition, so making the family money, we're helping us out.
How do you receive that?
Not well.
No? What did you remember what he said?
Not on that one particularly, but that really wasn't my dad's game. But going there, it was one of the best things that ever happened to me. It was a wake-up call that I needed in life, and you know, you're lucky when you can find that at the right age and find it sort of in a controlled manner like that. And St. John's was awesome. It's a great school, and it's an even better one today. So I'm really proud of what that place means.
I think high school was a 5-year experience for you. Your mom had said the last year of high school, which was where you spent a year somewhere else, was like paying for you to go to prison, I believe. But you mentioned St. John's being a formative experience. How so?
Yeah, I mean, collectively 10 years between high school and college. That was my, they call them doctors usually, but it was
character building years.
That's right. I definitely had plenty of character building. But it was the lesson of moving from there, from Georgetown Prep to St. John's, and then ultimately realizing that I still need a little more time. I was young when I graduated high school. I was only 17 years old, and I decided to go to prep school, which is a place called Fort Union Military Academy, which is a pretty extraordinary place in and of itself.
How so?
It's a really special place, about 30 miles outside of Charlottesville, Fort Union, Virginia, and it drew kids from all over the country and with some of the best talent. if you went to junior college, you'd burn your eligibility. So going here, you could basically get yourself like another year of high school. Give you a chance to take your SATs. A lot of guys went there to get their boards, get their grades up. Some guys went there to get better looks. I was like some combination of all three. And I thought it'd be a good year for me. My mother, yeah, she called it Lorton, which is the big penitentiary in DC. Which called Lorton with tuition. So that was basically where it was, because I sent her a holiday card that I had. It was a picture of Fork Union, and I drew jail bars on it. And I had a little picture of me like this, and I can't draw, and it just said, "Get me out of here." was my postcard.
So did you not like it at the time?
I mean, nobody likes going to a military school, you know, at 17, going on 18 years old when I started it. It was my decision. I wanted to go. I mean, I still had this dream of I wanted to play major college football.
And that was a step that
yeah,
you
I
needed
mean,
to take
Fork Union is a really special place. So the year that I went to Fork Union, there was, and it's really a large part of the reason that Under Armour started to begin with. There was 135 guys on our class, so a one-year prep school class. Guys went there because they were, you know, all conference, you know, all Met, all state, whatever the designation. There's like a lot of good football players. And I say we had a really special class. The coach realized he had too many people, so he said he had to weed this out. And so the decision was, when we started August 8th, and practice camp was going to go 3 weeks, so to the 29th. So we ran 3 weeks of 3-day practices. So by the end of 3 days, there were about 65 of us left in that class. So of the 65, though, what was unique is 23 of them wound up going on to sign Division I scholarships. I walked on at Maryland, so I wasn't part of that 23. Of the 23, 13 got drafted. 4 of them were first-round draft picks. One guy won the Heisman Trophy in Eddie George. But there was something really special about the guys that stayed and that made it and that went through. And there's like a brotherhood and a bond that still, you know, of course, exists and lives to this day. And it was that relationship from Fork Union that, again, was a really key aspect of why Under Armour, you know, exists today.
It seems like you came from a family of strong women. Your grandmother has been referred to, at least in media, as a Georgetown real estate maven. I think she had like 10 townhouses, had an office that she kept, I think, until she passed at 93.
Yep.
How do you think she influenced you?
I mean, she coaxed me into a good grandmother, you know, foot rub every now and then. But she was a grandmother. She didn't give you $1 or $5. She was like the special grandmother because she was as strong as it gets. She'd give you like a 20, and if you were really good and she liked you, she gave you a 50.
So there you go. Especially then.
Yeah, so you know how to do it. But you know, you'd stay the weekend and you'd do the whole thing. But a foot rub or two would get through it, and worth every bit of it. But she was really special. You know, her. She famously She outlived 3 husbands, all of which were Marines. The third of which was my mother's, or the first was my mother's father. And my mother was 12. Her 2 sisters were 6 and 4 years old each. So this is like 1948 or so, 48, 49. Her husband had a heart attack. Dies, leaves a single mom with 3 kids. She didn't have a college education, so she went out and she got a real estate license. She started renting apartments. Then she was able to, you know, buy her first townhouse. She ended up moving in with her sister, her Aunt Bridge, at this little house in Georgetown at 1406 35th Street. My mother and her sisters were raised there. And ironically, that's actually the house that still existed where I ended up when I graduated college, moved into and started Under Armour, you know, out of that little house. But she went on to, you know, I think she owned, you know, 10 or 11 properties around Georgetown by the time she passed. But she was a self-described, she was a tough woman.
Anything that stands out on that front?
With her, I mean, she would sort of the grit, the shine of her. Like there was no one really like her. Like she was one of those big lights in the room. I say she outlived 3 Marines, is that she had all these guys eating out of the palm of her hands. But you know, she was just a very special lady who just taught you sort of toughness, grit. I think a lot of the qualities that sort of built from. I mean, imagine being in that kind of situation in some way, somehow, moving with your sister, figure out, get your degree, or get a license and start selling and just keep moving, you know, not complaining.
What do you think you learned from your dad?
Oof. Yeah, I mean, my dad passed when I was 19. It gives you perspective. You know, the worst thing is when someone tells you, I found out I have this problem or disease or something else, and the first thing people usually say is, oh, let me tell you about mine. It's taught me that when I talk to friends of mine that go through, a parent passing or moving on, how hard that is. And all I can ever think about is man, it would have been great to have had the last, 30, 33 years, with my dad. For him to be able to see me and everything else. But to be honest, the relationship that we had is probably not unlike, many people, many of your viewers, the relationships they've had with their parents too, is when I say, sports can save the world, it's a big statement. But sports can certainly, it can build a relationship. And my dad and my relationship was sports. And it was pretty cut and dry. It was like if we wanted to talk, if I wanted to come to my games, like, be good, start. Get on the team, have a winning team, like fight through it. So it was all those things of trying to impress my dad, and there was nothing like, looking in, during a game and seeing him standing in the, in the end zone between the goalposts, with his arms crossed, just sitting there, watching. And he was supportive. He wasn't like, he wasn't hard, like, you missed that tackle, you had that play, but he just loved coming and seeing it. And he was there all through my high school years. He was there through Fork Union. He was there, my first year at Maryland. So. I remember getting to watch me suit up, and that was a pretty special day. It's one of the lessons I think that I apply today at Under Armour is that, Dad, why don't you come because you're supposed to come? You're my dad, you should do this. And like, that's one tact. The other tact is like, I don't know, like he likes sports a lot. Like I bet if I'm good, I bet he'll want to come watch me play football. I've thrown enough good parties in my life to know that, you can beg people, you can pay people, you can spiff people, like come to the party, do this, or you can focus on throwing the world's best party and everybody's gonna wanna be there. With my dad, I'm like, let me show you a great time. Like, come watch me play ball. It'll be a lot of fun. And that was something that built a connection of he and I, and something that I frankly translate to Under Armour today. Instead of begging or pleading, let's throw a great party and everybody's gonna wanna be there. That's how I think about the brand.
You remember the 7 a.m. snow shovel days?
Yeah, that wasn't anybody else forcing me though. That was,
You were hustling even back then.
Yeah, it was organic to me. I mean, it was just what I did. It felt like my goal when I was a kid, for whatever reason, is I always wanted to be independent. I didn't want to have to rely on anybody else because I'd planned on having, a scholarship to go to college. It's one of the reasons I wanted to play football. I wanted to impress them. I wanted, my older brother Stuart had played at Virginia Tech, and I'd been to see a game that they played at West Virginia, and I walked into the stadium and I saw these gladiators on the field. I'm like, I want to do that. I'm like, oh, and they'll pay you to do that? And the idea of being able to say to my parents of like, thank you for, raising me, and I've been a handful for sure, but you don't have to pay for my college. That was, sort of my goal and my ambition. And
even early on, like that, you were conscious of that.
Yeah. I never liked. My dad was. He was tight. He was like, hey Dad, I'm I got a date this weekend. Can I borrow $20? $20. What do you need $10 for? I'm not giving you $5. So.
And he lost a lot in the crash, right?
He went through a thing with real estate where at the end of his life he'd sort of been extended. He had one building that he basically bet everything on. And he got caught up with the bank and sort of things didn't go so well. So,
what do you think that taught you?
Well, I never knew that he had something was really, personal. My father had multiple myeloma, which is a cancer that today, like a good friend, Tom Brokaw, has been, effectively, there's a number of people like that I don't know if we're calling it cured yet, but they're certainly prolonged for an extended period of time. But I'll never forget one day, it was my first year at Maryland, and I was, I guess it was my second year, and I came home that day, and I walked in, I remember my mom saying, your dad's not doing well. And I said, what do you mean your dad's not doing well? Because he never told any of us, we didn't know that he was sick.
Really?
And so this is August of 1991. And and I hadn't seen him like through this lens. Maybe I just wasn't looking, but I'll never forget. I said, what do you, she goes, can you stay home from your workouts? I'm like, Mom, I got to go to my workouts. Like, what do you want me to do with Dad? And he sort of turned the corner, and for some reason, he just looked so frail, and I hadn't seen it. And he'd lost a lot of weight, and he was like a 205 or 10 pound guy, and he was probably like 175, and it was like, it happened over a period of time. I remember he turned the corner, and I said, "Dad, what's going on?" And he collapsed. And then he started, vomiting blood. And I'm looking at my mother going, "What the hell is going on?" And she goes, "We got to, I got to call his doctor." I said, "Doctor?" And so I pick him up, put him in the back of my mom's car, and I get in there. She's like, "His doctor's in Virginia," and it was, a 45-minute drive away. And I think we made it there in 20 minutes. I was shoulder rolling. I was, blowing by people. I've got my dad in the back, and he was basically passed out. Pull up to the front of the hospital, grab my dad out of the back, and walk him inside and say, "Somebody help me. Somebody help my dad." And the doctor came out, and then, he took him back there, and then the doctor, explained to us, your father has multiple myeloma. He doesn't have very long to live. I look at my mom like, how do we not know this? And he'd been wearing something like a radiation box that he'd had on him for a period of time. And, I hadn't figured it out, but then he said, your father's, his illness is terminal. And so at that point, it was tough. That my freshman year was my first year playing. I was able to start on all four special teams that year. And he got to come see me play, which was great. But then we ended up by, December, we had him in hospice care. And then we, he passed away January 2nd, 1992.
Why do you think he didn't want you to know?
I don't know. It's sort of, I grew up in that genre where, this wasn't like, "I love you, son." It wasn't like, we never said that. That wasn't, it was the nonverbal was like, come to the game and kind of give the head nod. And like, that was enough. And it wasn't me going, there's something missing from my life with this. But, it was brutal, at a level, but it was one of those things like, pick up and keep moving. So, I dealt with it, but it's something that served me, and it's something that taught me, the bar that I want for my relationship with my daughter and my son too, which is to make sure with my family that they're in a really loving place, and tell them that I love them every single day, and make sure they hear it from me, and that's what matters most.
You think that at least indirectly played into your work ethic?
Sure. I think wanting the chip on the shoulder. When you don't have a dad, and there's, I guess today I hate saying it, that's maybe more commonplace. It shouldn't be, because everybody should have a dad that tells them that they love them. But yeah, without question. I mean, getting kicked out of school, like having that, I'm going to show them all. Like that drives a lot. You
remember selling at the Grateful Dead concert and how your sales compared to that of your brothers?
Yeah. Those guys were deadbeats. They didn't do a thing. So it was
like a shocking difference, right?
Well, I mean, we went down there. This was a lot of fun. It was my brother Scott had been to Guatemala to go learn Spanish, and Scott was one of my early partners in Under Armour too.
He got like 4% of the company, right? Or early on.
He did great. Yeah. He did great. So I had. This was when we were. It's one of my favorite movies, Glengarry Glen Ross. It's like, the sign in the back, it says, salesmen are born, they're not made, and so you have like this, like, is it in you or not? And so my brother Scott, I was like 13 or 14 years old. Scott was like 18, he'd just gotten back from Guatemala, learned some Spanish, but he brought these 2 bricks of those hemp bracelets that you find at like Grateful Dead shows. And they cost like $20 a brick. And so he just said, "Hey, there's a Dead show in town this weekend. Let's go. We're going to go sell these bracelets, and you guys are going to roll the money up to me. And here's how it works." I'm like, "I don't know, sure, I'll go with you." So we made these cardboard like signs, and then we strung the bracelets across. So basically, the people like at these festivals walking around with the bracelets, going, bracelets, $2 a piece. Hemp bracelets, $2 a piece, 3 for $5. So we took the subway down there, got out, had a big backpack filled with them, hid the bracelet someplace, and my brother Scott was like, "Okay." It was like 11 o'clock in the morning, and the festival was all day, the concert didn't start till that night. And everybody break up and go sell bracelets. So we meet back at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Colin comes back and goes, "Colin, how'd you do?" He's a writer in Seattle now. And he goes, "Well, I sold the first couple, and then I started feeling guilty about how much money we made, so I just gave the rest of them away." My brother Scott comes and he goes, "How'd you do?" And it looks like he was trading beers for bracelets or maybe something else. And he was sort of out there. I'm like, you guys are like, give me the rest of them. I got $350 in my pocket. I've been sold out for an hour. Like, give me the rest. I'm going to go sell the rest of them. So it was a good day and a lesson in learning that, yeah, I loved it. I loved walking around. And then as I got older from 14 and grew up and continued to do dead shows, and started getting big for football, I started looking too much like a cop, so people stopped buying stuff from me.
Really?
I heard that. I tried to tease, like I'd go and I'd have one time that I put I'd wear like a big floppy hat and I'd put like a big tie-dye t-shirt on, and it would work a little bit, but it helped.
How'd you avoid the college rules restricting collegiate athletes from holding jobs?
Yeah. Well, the rule, prior to NIL was you were not allowed to have a job, but nobody said anything about starting a company. So, between Maryland, in the summers, I did that last year of banging nails, working construction, wearing Timberlands to work every day, and sweating and hard and starting the morning at 6 or 7 o'clock. I learned there's a better way to do it, and working for somebody for a salary or paycheck was not something that inspired me. And I thought, I'd rather do it myself. And as a walk-on, I didn't have a scholarship. I was lucky enough to earn one after my freshman year at Maryland, which was like one of the greatest days of my life.
Was it?
Yeah.
What stands out to you from finding that out?
Well, I mean, I was a walk-on, so I say my freshman year, so I had my red shirt year. And it was after my freshman year, and I went down and had a couple big plays. And I was like the special teams guy. I was like, I made it my thing. And when you have specialists, it was like, come out and like, I'm gonna run down and, we had this thing called Be the Hammer, Not the Nail. It was a Be the Hammer, Not the Nail award. And so like my freshman year, I got the Hammer award, like, I don't know, 3, 4, or 5 times or something. So, and it was basically you'd run down, and I was the wedge buster guy. So it was where and again, in football, they tell you to keep your head up, they tell you, lead with your shoulders, all those things. But I'm like, the heaviest thing on my body is my helmet. Like, these guys are about 30% more athletic than I am. So I'm gonna use everything I have to throw into being able to break that wedge and get to the ball tackler. And, and be on the team, be a part of that arena experience, and tied in with your teammates, and knowing that you're working for a goal that's bigger than any one of us, which are like all these lessons of life that of course I apply at UA.
What about that, as you're thinking about it, kind of moves you?
Team. There's a great line that Steve Mariucci has, the old great coach at Cal, the 49ers, et cetera. And he says his favorite part of football is the huddle. It's where you get all these different, these people that come from different places, different backgrounds, different colors, different religions, different sizes. And in this one moment, everybody comes together, everybody gets quiet, and they yield to one person to say, what are we doing? And that comes from a higher power that's from a press box or from the sideline, and goes to the quarterback, and then one guy calls the play, and everybody says, you know what, we got it. They clap hands, they break the huddle, and they go run a play. They get a chance to do it again. But at that moment, everybody's doing the exact same coordinated thing, and that's what makes, I don't know, I think it makes it's beautiful. When you have that, when the play works, and then there's other times when you have to deal with things like when people come back and they're like, no, I don't like that play. We should run a different one. Why aren't we doing this one? And that's you're like, you know what? We're all wearing the same jersey. And that's a very special thing, is to have your jersey, be in the game, have the ability to compete. And that's what we get the chance to do.
So do I have this correct? You stole the Cupid Valentine idea from somebody else?
Yeah. Good artists create, the best artists steal. I was at College Park. I'd realized that this bracelet thing, my brother wasn't going to learn Spanish anymore. And so I'd sold through the 2,000 of bracelets. And I was getting into t-shirts, but this is one thing that in the calendar, as a walk-on, I was always trying to say, like, Mom, Dad, like, I got it, like, I'll get my tuition and books. Now, to be clear, I don't think I told my parents about the scholarship till at least 6 months after I had it. And so, like, tuition and books, like, boy, it's gonna be a hard year, Mom, I hate doing it, maybe next year I'll take the $3,000. No, but I was my freshman year at Maryland. I'd gone to work for some guy, and he said, "Hey, I've got this rose service. You know, can you help me deliver flowers?" And I was like, "Sure." And the day that I went to go, I showed up at this guy. He's like, "You know, how can I help?" He's like, "You know, meet me at my apartment at 2:00. You know, I'll give you flowers to deliver." And he'd bought flowers from a wholesaler. He pulled them together, and I walk in this apartment, and it was like, you know, 1 or 2 in the afternoon. And there's like 8 people running around, totally disorganized. This guy's like assembling flowers in his room. And I'm like, he's like, "I need you to deliver these flowers." He gave me like 12 orders. And it was like College Park, Bethesda. It was like in 30 miles apart. It was a Friday afternoon. And I remember getting in the car, and I ended up delivering all the flowers. And the last one I delivered was like 10:30 at night, because it was like, this was the mission. So I did the mission for him. I got back and said, "This is the worst organized thing I've ever seen." He's like, "Yeah, man, I'm graduating." So I was like, "All right, we can do better than that." So the next year, I'm like, this is a pretty good business, because it comes right after, or right in the middle of winter workouts starting, just before spring ball. So there was like a break where February 14th hit in the calendar of a football calendar. So it worked perfect. And again, you can't have a job. They didn't say anything about starting a company. So I had some guy go out and draw me this Calvin and Hobbes cartoon of like Calvin beating Hobbes over the head with a, you know, it doesn't like, "Why didn't you buy me roses for Valentine's Day?" Stuck these flyers all over campus, and called it Cupid's Valentine. Our kind buds smoke all the competition, which led to a bunch of knuckleheads calling like, "Do you really have kind buds?" There was like, "This is a serious business. We're selling flowers." $25 for a dozen flowers my freshman year, and bought 1,200 flowers, put them in boxes, you know, sold through all 100 dozen flowers. You know, gross had a $5 delivery charge, gross $3,000, cost me like $600. I'm like, this is great. Came back the next year, and my girlfriend at the time, now my wife DJ, she was like critical in having the free labor to be the one who was taking phone orders at this time. Came back the next year, I'm like, we can do better than that. We did 250 dozen. My junior year, we did 350 dozen. My senior year, delivered 1,186 dozen flowers in a single day. The only problem was the ambition was selling 1,500 dozen flowers in a single day. But it was like 3 days staying up in a row. And I'll never forget, you know, taking phone calls, like leading up into like some of the like important lessons learned from, you know, flower delivery was I also bartended on Wednesday nights, which I
heard you were quite the bartender.
Not bad. But that's where I learned a lot of great lessons behind a bar too, where you learn fast math, you learn how to deal with people, you learn how to manage with, you know, the person who's like, you know, they're waving a $10 bill at you and, you know, trying to be a big shot or something else. I'm like, you know, let's be clear, I can be bought. It's just not $10 for this amount. So, you know, and I'll make her fall in love with you too if you know, let me help out to be a good bartender.
In a weird way, do you think bartending actually was quite beneficial in teaching you sales skills?
Incredibly important. Relationships, control. I'll never forget the first lesson that I learned. At a bar, the guy came in, he goes, "I'm gonna teach you everything you need to know about being a bartender." I said, "What's that?" He says, "It's this." So what's that? It's this 1 second. You know, it's like there's somebody who owns this bar, but like when you're behind the bar, like you're in charge. And now you're accountable for the bar, you're accountable for the environment, the vibe, the culture at the bar as well. You've got a bank, you're running a business. There's a lot of people having a lot of fun, but you've got a job to do. At the end of it, you've got to sit down, you've got to be clear of mind and thought, and be able to count your bank, have everything reconcile, be able to give that back to the bank and do a good job. That was something I took a lot of pride in. Like your tips will be reflective of the job that you do as well too. And there's people that did it the wrong way, there's people that did it the right way, but I took a lot of pride in like being, you know, really great and having people want to come see and come spend time with you and like helping the bar, promoting it and all those kinds of things. It was critical lessons. But you know, when I could go on a Wednesday, you know, for a gig that started at 9 o'clock and, you know, close at 12:30, count my bank by 1 o'clock, back home by 1:30, you know, 2 o'clock in the morning, have $200 or $300 in my pocket like all week. It was like, all right, it kept it moving, it kept it going. So nobody ever knew about that bartending gig either on Wednesday nights at Nantucket Landing or Parker's.
What do you remember from visiting New York's Garment District before you graduated?
It was an awesome place, you know, 1996. It's fascinating to think about. 1980, I think it was like 95% of the apparel worn in the United States was manufactured in the United States. By 1996, the time that I started Under Armour, it was 50% of apparel used in the U.S. was produced in the U.S. So let me correct my math on these two. 5 years later, it was down to less than 10%. Today, it's less than 1% at best. And this isn't some ambition of how do we get the manufacturing district back or manufacturing back to the U.S. because I spent the first 5 or 6 years of starting Under Armour on a soapbox. Being proud of the fact that we made our products, from Baltimore to Bel Air, Ohio, to Ephrata, Pennsylvania, to Allentown, Pennsylvania. And I didn't know anything about manufacturing when I'd started UA, but I'd heard about this place called the Garment District in New York City. So I got in my 1991 Ford Explorer, drove up to 34th and 7th Avenue, parked my car, and started walking around and just trying to find, I've got this synthetic material. Like, is there more stuff like this? Because I bought this first sample, ripping the content label out of my compression shorts that I wore at Maryland. Took them to a local fabric store called Minnesota Fabrics or something in Beltsville, Maryland, just next to College Park. Found this material that fit the idea I had, made my first 7 prototypes, tried them out on my teammates, and realized this is something better than a short sleeve cotton t-shirt in the summer and a long sleeve cotton t-shirt in the winter that doesn't get wet and soaked, and nobody ever thought about apparel. Apparel never been part of the consideration for, is this something that athletes would want that's a better solution? So walking into the Garment District, it was like, 100 fabric shops. And I remember I'm like, wow, there's so much more I can see. It was finding a manufacturer who was down on 10th Avenue that I'd picked up a copy of WWD, Women's Wear Daily, looked in the back, found a contract manufacturer, and like, I need to make my first run of shirts here. Because I'd gone to a local tailor in Maryland, had the first 7 or 8, the sort of proof of concept. Now I was going to go to scale and build 500 shirts. Found a manufacturer in the old NBC building, the National Biscuit Company. These guys were, walked into this shop that was like interesting at best, the guys that I found. But they brought them fabric, gave it to these guys. Supposed to take 2 weeks to make my shirts. It took like 2 months to get it, back from them. And again, the answer was always like, oh yeah. We shipped them on Tuesday. Can you give me a tracking number? Yeah, I'm gonna have to find that for you and get back to you. Oh, they haven't gotten here. Oh, they must be out. Let me check on them again. Anyway, I had my first run of product in New York City, where I took those first 500 shirts, and between my high school team, St. John's, there was 11 guys signed Division I scholarships for my high school team. 4 of them made it to the NFL. I think 2 of them won Super Bowls. The 13 plus guys at Fork Union, plus the friends of friends. One of my founding partners, Ryan Wood, at Under Armour, Colorado to Fork Union Military Academy, went to Youngstown State, won the 1AA National Championship his freshman year with head coach Jim Tressel, lost in the championship game their sophomore year, transfers to Arizona State, gets in rooms with Jake Plummer. And so it was like this network of people that I had. His high school best friend was a guy named Tony Baselli, the first #1 draft pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So like, that was basically the genesis of Under Armour. It wasn't like a clear product idea. I was coming out of school or coming through school, and I'm like, I know 50, 60 guys that are playing in the NFL. It wasn't like I had this great idea, what do I do? It started with the idea, which is always the line that I give to young people, to kids. Tell me something smart. Like, what can I do to, be a great entrepreneur? And my easiest advice is always just like, utilize your network. Well, what does that mean? The person on the left or right of you, they may look like they're just the kid that, eats nuts all the class or picks their nose or something else, but they may be the next Fortune 500 CEO. They may be the next, keep those relationships fresh. And that's where my relationships were with these group of individuals who had made it to the highest level of the sport that I aspired to be a part of. And realized really early on that I wasn't going to play in the NFL, and it wasn't like a lack of ambition, like, by golly, I'm going to do it, but I knew sport was going to be a part of my life. And recognizing that, these 60 athletes were, the best use was not me calling them and saying, hey, can I borrow $300 from you? Congratulations, you made it to the NFL. It was, hey, I went to New York, I made these shirts, I got about 500 of them, and I put about 60 care packages together. To everybody I ever played with, every friend of friends. So Jake Plummer, Tony Baselli, got them, hey Ryan, can you send this to these guys? And Ryan went on to be drafted by the Dallas Cowboys, played with them as well. So not
an insignificant expense. either.
No. And sort of an awesome opportunity, because as I put, the first $16,000 of seed money that I had into like making this first run of 500 shirts, getting these packages put together and getting the brand out there. Because what I realized is, number one, I had a network. But number two, that network had a lifespan on it. And the average career in the NFL is 3 years and 3 games. The pension kicks in at 3 years and 4 games, is how it works in the league. And so I realized these guys are famous, but they're going to be famous for the next couple of years. So what can I do without leveraging them, without taking things from them, but how could I be accretive to their process and give them a piece of performance? So I put together packages of 3 t-shirts. I sent them to everybody I knew. I asked guys, like, can you also give me the names? Like, who's your equipment manager? When you were at Florida State, who was your equipment manager at Miami? Who's your equipment manager at USC? One of these guys, these equipment managers, the guys that are actually in charge of the budgets. I put packages of 3 t-shirts together for everybody that I knew, and just said, hey, this is Plank. There's this company I'm working for. Because if I said it was me, they'd be like, oh, bull. What is this thing? Is this real or not? So I was always kind of used like this mystical, there's some bigger force,
Explain why you had 2 business cards.
One business card said Kevin Plank President, another business card said Kevin Plank Sales Manager. And so to any customer, I'd always give them the Kevin Plank Sales Manager business card. And the reason for that is because when they'd hit you and say, we're going to need a better number, how do we negotiate this? I'm like, geez, I'd love to give you a bigger number, but the old lady back in DC would never go for it, so I'm sorry, my number is firm. And then you needed the president card, because when I talked to our suppliers, our fabric mills, our manufacturers, they needed to know that the buck stopped someplace and that like they're going to get paid, and I was the one that was going to do it for them. So firm handshake, again, look him in the eye, Kevin Plank, like, yeah, you'll get your money.
You upgraded the 91 Ford Explorer to a 94 Ford Bronco at some point, which also similarly got a ton of use, right?
Yeah. 53,000 miles those first 2 years, because at 23, starting my company, 22, 23, I wasn't old enough to rent a car. So I'd fly to Atlanta, and I tried doing this, excuse me, can you help me? This is life before Uber. And so I tried working it out with Hertz. I tried working it out with budget rent a car. Nobody would cut me a break. From the 25 years old is when the insurance kicks in, so you're not allowed to rent a car. So I realized I'm just going to have to drive everywhere. I'd go to, UVA, Virginia, Virginia Tech, down to South Carolina, stop through Marshall, like just map these routes of how am I going to go visit, 10, 15, 20 schools in a trip, and try to make, one team in the morning, one team in the afternoon. But I realized, like, when I sent out those packages for my friends, I was like, do me a favor, I sent you 3 t-shirts. Try this product. Wear it under your pads. And if you like it, please give one to each guy in the locker next to you. And if they like it and you want more, tell your equipment manager and have them call me. And that was like one of the biggest unlocks when I got started. Is it was a network I have of guys that would get me in the door to validate the product. But then it was sort of figuring out, so how does this work? When you look at and 96 was very different than sort of the way that deals are structured today, which are very formal. It's one mono brand, like this is our outfitter, our supplier. When I played, it was like Nike shoes, Champion jerseys, things were still sort of coming together. And I'll never forget when the equipment manager, I went to our equipment manager at Maryland, Ron O'Ringer, and I just said, hey, Ron, if I wanted to sell this product, like, how does it work? And he goes, well, you talk to me. I said, what does that mean? Not the president, not the athletic director, not the head coach, not the offensive coordinator. He's like, that's me, that's the equipment manager. And by that, he's like, I'm in charge of a budget of, $1 million, $1.5 million to build uniforms and bring them in. I'm like, really? Like, you guys do the laundry every day. It was like, oh no, this is now, and now it's a full-blown administrative job. And back then it was a little more of like, get them dry. But the pitch that we had for the equipment managers was, A, this is a much better product for your athletes, this works, it's great. But the other thing that worked and made Under Armour relevant as to how it grew so quickly was the fact that by putting synthetic in the washing machine, these guys basically had to stay there until all the laundry was done every night. And so we could get them out of there basically an hour earlier, because Under Armour would dry in the dryer like this versus sitting around waiting for soaking wet cotton t-shirts to dry.
Did you kind of think you were done when you checked your bank account and there was only $1,500 left?
Yeah, it was more like negative $1,500,
okay.
But...
did you kind of deep down think that was probably it?
Well, that was a longer story. So I'd had about $2,000 in the bank that day. And I'm giving you're getting a lot of like the grit stuff or the, I don't know, sort of the edgy stuff. There's like a much softer, like the lessons learned from getting kicked out of high school, like those definitely trailed on. But this is life before private equity, angel investing, like just didn't really exist in '96. The Small Business Administration played a critical role in helping to finance the company, and so I'm grateful to the federal government for their help with doing that.
Lots of credit cards?
Yeah, about 5 different credit cards totaling about $40,000. So my initial $16,000 in seed money to $40,000 in credit cards to friends and family, and at one point I'm selling a point in the company for $1,000. And it was like I had one guy that was a friend of mine, and I was like, I need $10,000. And they're like, oh, do I want to invest in you or not? And they're like hemming and hawing about it. Like, you know what, I'm going to make the investment. I'll give you the 10 grand. Great. I'm going to need the money now. I'm gonna need that now. He's like, okay, I'll fill out a check then right now. I'm like, I need you to like come with me to the bank. We're gonna need to like deposit it right now. Have you sign the check over if that's okay? Like it needs to be clear by 2 o'clock. So it was one of those, and they turned me down. But there was one time where I turned and I
too bad for that person.
It's okay. It's okay. There's like there's like 100 people that now are like, oh, I was going to invest in your company. Now I'm like, I don't remember you. So, but that's a privilege. That's an honor, and that's what a great testament to all the people that have worked so hard to build you way up. But there was one time that I went to the bank and I'm like, I used to sit every night with a big blue checkbook on my lap. And I'd call the bank, see what the balance, how many checks had cleared. This is before digital banking. You basically would write a check, you'd send it to somebody, they'd have to deposit it, how long it took for the float from one bank to another bank. You had like 4 or 5 days of float that you could play with. So I was constantly in this, I think I'm gonna get this other check, it'll come in on Thursday, I'll get this other check, it'll come in on Friday. And one day I was like, I'm just short and I need to make my payroll, which was only myself, Ryan Wood, and Kip Fulks, my original partners within Under Armour. And it was like Thursday afternoon. I'm like, we're short. We need like $2,500. So I took out the last $2,000 in the bank, got in my car, drove to Atlantic City, and like knowing that I needed to double that. I basically needed to make. I needed to come home with $4,500. Got like $4,000 and then proceeded to lose it all. And to like know what broke feels like. So this must have been a year into the company, around 1997. I'd come home from. In that drive, like drove to Atlantic City, had the presence of mind to fill my car with gasoline before I walked into the casino. Walked in, lost all the money that I had. In driving back, I was broke like there was no money. I was now short of probably about $4,000 short of all those checks that were gonna come through. I had no money in my car, and this is back when we used to have change. Like there was no quarters left, and I'd gone through the dimes too, and like the nickels, like anything silver was going to get a look from me, but I couldn't even pay the toll at the Delaware Memorial Bridge coming home. And what happens when you can't pay the toll at a toll house? They stop the line of traffic. The person comes out. They write down your license number. They write down your license plate. It's incredibly embarrassing, like one of the lowest points. And driving back, I had nowhere to go, and so I went to my mother's house. I'm like, I need dinner. And to do this was like demonstrating the love of my mother. She's a terrible cook, wonderful woman, awful cook. So knowing that I'm going there for dinner was not a good sign. So I show up and she's like, how's everything going? What's going on with the company? And I'll never forget. Anything positive you say to somebody, they're going to tell 1 or 2 people. Anything negative you say, they're going to tell 12 to 15 people. So I was always really tight with that list. And so even my mom, I didn't want her talking to my brothers, and I didn't want to hear like, how's everything going? And I'm like, it's going great. Just signed, 3 more schools. We just, Georgia Tech's on board. We got this one on board, and I'll never forget. It was a day where I haven't wept a lot in my life, but I certainly wept on that day, sitting in my car, going, "You blew it, you blew it, you blew it. You chose the wrong thing."
What's that place like when you're in that mindset? Like,
I blew it. Mm-hmm. It's a terrible place. It's doubt. It's disbelief. It's it's vulnerability, which I'd say is a weakness, but today I know it's a strength. But like learning from that place, so like I screwed up. I made the wrong decision. I was thinking about a couple different things I could have done after school, and I chose this one, and it hasn't worked out, and so now I'm broke. What am I going to do?
Go back to Prudential or Taking
Yeah,
that
I'd had a
Prudential life job?
$40,000 job offer from Prudential. So I ended up going to, at the time I kept the P.O. box because I was in a residential neighborhood. I couldn't register the business at grandma's basement. I couldn't have the phone lines coming. I had to be careful how I answered the phone. So I went to the P.O. box that was in Kensington near my mother's house, and I was like, oh, I'll just go check the mail. And I walk in there, I open the P.O. box, and there's a check for $7,800 from Georgia Tech, and I'm like, what was I talking about? Back in business, let's go get this thing. And I promise, it was the last time that I ever doubted, like, did I make the right choice? From that day forward, I was like, take the ball, and we're gonna run as hard as we can and go build an incredible company.
You mentioned your mom's cooking, and how about the Fruit Loops and lasagna you lived on with Sal and Debbie?
Oh, that was an awful experience. The guy who really taught me manufacturing, because I'd gone from, I was in DC at the time, I found a manufacturer up here in Baltimore. I had another friend who was starting a business named Dan Prunzik, great player at Maryland, and he had a friend named Kurt Angle. And Kurt was a big wrestler of WWE fame, but he was a great Olympic wrestler before that. We were gonna build this thing called the Anglet. He said, hey, how did you make your product? How's it work? I said, go to the Chamber of Commerce, find a group of manufacturers. He ends up pointing me to this place called AAA in the USA, which is in Bel Air, Ohio, which sits right on the Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania border. And Dan called me and he said, hey, I'm here, I'm trying to get the Anglet, which is what they were trying to do. I'm trying to get the Anglet built. And this guy, Sal here, I told him about your business, and he told me to call you, he wants to talk to you. So I pick up the phone, and this guy, Sal, is, he's like, Kevin, this is Sal. I'm from the Bronx, right? The kind of guy that started every sentence with, I've been doing this 35 years, you don't know shit, kid. Just like every sentence would start that way. And he's like, where are you making your stuff? And at the time, my manufacturer in Baltimore was giving me the runaround, and I couldn't really get them to order, and they had an order for me, and I'm like, where's my stuff? He's like, we got a bigger order from Reebok, we're not making for you anymore. Loaded up the back of my Ford Explorer, it was in DC, it was like 9:45 in the morning. Drove to Baltimore, picked up everything I had, loaded it in the back of that car, drove to Bel Air, Ohio that afternoon. Didn't have any place to stay. Sat there working out patterns with Sal, the line supervisor, this woman named LMA Holmes, who actually still works at UA today. And we sat there working on patterns till about 7, 8 o'clock at night. And at the time, it was like, well, where are you going? I was like, well, I'd have to drive home to get a room. I'll be back tomorrow morning. 4 hours is the drive time. And he said, why don't you come stay at the house? I said, great. And I go to this house, and Sal, it was like this little house in Bel Air, Ohio. It had these like paper thin walls. And Sal was like a performer or something, but it was a very, it was a lonely night of sleeping on some couch like this, listening to Sal and Debbie, I guess make relations or something, but it was like, it was kind of holding my pillowcase. You're going, this is a very awkward experience. And so, but love was in the air, and Under Armour was bound to get built from something as aspirational as that. So no baby that night, but certainly a brand was built or born.
It seems like there's a kind of confluence of events in 1999. I mean, because one, you have Any Given Sunday, where not only do you convince the Oliver Stone film to use your product, but they pay the 40 grand or whatever it is to your 14-person company.
Yeah, you've done your research,
at the time. And then two, you convince your employees to go without pay for a few weeks to take out the ad in ESPN, the magazine.
Yeah.
One moment more consequential than the other for you?
I mean, the Any Given Sunday was a big deal. It was heading into Y2K. At the time so our first year we did 17,000 in revenues, 110,000, 400,000, $1.3 million. So what was that? 99, you were, $1 million company. And I needed money. I was working with the mills, but the orders were picking up. And the hardest thing about any new business, and people ask what's the most difficult thing, it's cash. Cash is king, cash is queen, to make sure that you just have enough of it. Getting in front of the supply chain, because I'd have to place an order of raw materials, it was 60 to 90 days to have that from order to being built. You needed credit for that to happen. I didn't have credit. I was able to get about an $80,000 or $90,000 credit line from one of our important partner mills. And I found out that I could get people to make the same things at other mills, which would allow me to go from $80,000 credit here to an $80,000 credit here, $80,000 credit there. Built that first, went out and had that first run of shirts that were built from these manufacturers. These guys really, from what I learned from the manufacturers, like how do you piece together the pain of cash or getting in front of it. 90 days to order the fabric. My credit had to be good, but my credit was basically maxed the entire time from 97, at 80 grand. So I'd have to send them checks to basically pay down to get them to place new orders. That's why getting other manufacturers helped. Then you'd have to ship the goods. Then you had like the Georgia Techs, the check that I'd forgotten about from Georgia Tech, that an order that I'd done for them 6 months before, going through a government bureaucracy. It took that long to be able to get paid to me. And so trying to increase that cash on cash cycle was like one of the most difficult things that I've ever had to bear with.
And then the sales come in from both the movie and the magazine ad, and you're off kind of.
But it was a bet with the movie. I mean, that year in '99, everybody was worried about Y2K, like what's happening with, is the world going to end when the zeros turn over on the computers? And there was this movie coming out, and I had a friend of mine who was an extra, on the movie. And I said, "What are you doing after school? Did you make it in the NFL?" "No, I didn't, but I'm doing this Oliver Stone movie down in Miami. What's that? Can you tell me a little more about it?" Found out who it was, found out where the production office was, put a package together, wrote a letter, and just sent to the head costume designer, this woman, Mary Zofries, and just said, "Dear Mary, my name's Kevin Plank. We have the latest new company, which is now outfitting, the state of Miami alone, Florida State, University of Florida, University of Miami, Jacksonville, and the Miami Dolphins. All wear our brand." And I sent the product package on a Monday, got there on a Tuesday. I got a phone call by Wednesday afternoon, and it was like, "Hey, Oliver's now seen this. He was looking for something interesting in the product space that would be like a character in the movie. We like your brand a lot." I'm like, "Well, that's great." He's like, "Why don't you go ahead and send us, can you send more samples out there?" "Sure." "And then just send us another 100. I'm like, "We're gonna need to charge you for the other 100. And they're like, "What? Like, do you understand the exposure we have?" I'm like, "Yeah, I get it, but we're gonna need to charge you for that." So throughout the course of the filming of the movie Any Given Sunday, which was like this, nobody knew how big it was going to be, but it was going to be an Oliver Stone, biopic, massive deal. And so they ended up paying for it. They spent about 40 grand with us, and Under Armour certainly became a key character in that movie, like showing up on Jamie Foxx and showing up on, LL Cool J, and showing up just like on, Al Pacino, Cameron Diaz, like all these great, Hollywood stars that were there. But in order to celebrate it, I was like, this movie's going to come out, and we've never done an ad before. We haven't been in marketing. We've just been sending our brochures around that we had. And wouldn't it be great if we could market this? And so I called ESPN the magazine, this was the preferred medium at the time. And it was 25 grand for a half-page ad. So I remember calling a company meeting. There were like 17 of us at the time, and just said, "Hey, listen, we got a little bit of money right now, but I want to spend it, I want to run this ad on ESPN, the magazine." And we sort of like would let everybody like give their input, and like, "I think we need more material, we need more machinery, we need to hire more people." It's like, "I think we should run the ad." And so that's where I'm like, and we may need some money, so anybody that doesn't need their paycheck, like if you want to skip a week, it'd be really helpful. We'll appreciate it with equity. And then a bunch of people participated, and some people were like, "Hey, I can't," and like that was okay. But we had to prepay this $25,000 ad. So for a 1 point whatever million dollar company, we ended up doing, from that one ad in ESPN the magazine, we ended up doing like $850,000 like the next week. So it was like this amount of flow, because I had inventory. It was just like, well, how are you going to sell this? It was the end of the season. Teams were all done. So it was December. It was just like basically clearing out our inventory. So it took me another month to fill all the orders, just to get the fabric in and get things going. But like, some of my best advice to new entrepreneurs as well is always, before you worry about private equity or anything else, do you have inventory? I've got inventory. Why don't you go sell your inventory? Because it doesn't come with a vote or an opinion, and you can actually finish the vision that you have for that brand. And not to say there's great private equity investors. I had many of them too that helped, but early on it's important to be able to just get that sort of operation bootstrap, pull yourself up.
The 2005 IPO, what was the cash offer you got the day before?
Yeah.
That would have been take home, you personally.
Yeah.
And why did you decide against it?
It was more like a few months before then, okay. But it was for like $850 million, and my banker sent it over. It was an offer from another major company.
Which company?
It was VF Corp, and I'll never forget. I was thinking, like, do I say that or not? But yeah, it was VF Corp. And my banker called me. He goes, I got an offer here. It's $850. He goes, but if you want it, he goes, I'll get you $1 billion easy. Like, let me at him. And so it's basically $1 billion on the table. And I thought about it, and I talked to probably 25 or 30 different people. At the time, I was 31, 32 years old, and I still own 50-some% of the company. And I remember I talked to everybody, and it's like, I remember calling my lead director, this guy Buzzy Krongard, real funny. He ran Alex Brown. He was the CIA, the really cool man. And everybody was like, oh yeah, my God, you got this, like, what do I do? And everybody's like, what do you mean, what do you do? Are you crazy? I remember calling Buzzy. I said, Buzzy, we got this offer. You're the lead director. Something we really got to think about. He just goes, so when do we close? And I'm like, well, I'm not really there. But I talked to 3 people, our CFO at the time, this guy, Wayne Marino, really conservative guy. And he's like, I don't know. I think might be something special here. There was Ed Stack at Dick's Sporting Goods. And, his opinion was, look, I'm partial. I'd like a competitor to Nike. I think you guys have a chance. You could do it. And he said, for me, Kevin, it was never just about the money. And like that really stuck with me. And the third was my wife. And I just said, what do you think? And she just goes, but you love Under Armour. So I was like, yeah, we turned it down. And then, which was incredibly risky because, a lot of people had invested some of those, $1,000 inputs and things. And, if the stock never got above the $1 billion, you're vulnerable to lawsuits and all these other bad things that could happen. So it was definitely a bit of a risk.
Had you taken that, you just invest that in index funds, you'd still be a billionaire 20 years later and not have, put in the couple decades of work since then.
You're doing the math for me, yes.
Yeah,
I got it too.
But I have to imagine that's, you've thought about that.
No. I mean, the beautiful thing about, I think, the entrepreneur mindset is I do a pretty good job of knowing where we are. And like, it hasn't been a bad ride. It's been an awesome ride.
Yeah.
The experience, the athletes, the interaction, more importantly, like, I don't know, would Under Armour exist today, or would be some portfolio brand, of another company that was like here today and is relying on the product manager that was responsible for running it. But like, we've been able to build Under Armour to something special. You're sitting here in our hometown today. You get a chance to see the Under Armour Sports House, which is as unique and extraordinary as it gets. It's meant to be the living physical manifestation of walking into an athletic brand. Little girls and little boys that now get to try on and like have that Under Armour, man, I don't know, maybe I can, maybe I can't.
Well, and at some point it's just money. Like it.
Yeah, I never want to be but now I have shareholder money. So but it's a thing that you want to make sure that you're respectful of that you understand that process. But this is, we're at the big boy and girl room, so we got to make the right decisions. But it was, but without it, fulfilling the vision of many of the things which Under Armour stands for today, because I do believe that the greatest chapters of this company are in front of us. And, it's fun telling some of these old stories and, kicking back and getting into it. But like the energy and excitement of what we have coming for us, like, I'm proud of our story and our past. I really am. But the best part of it all is the simplicity of, that little girl or that little boy, when they take an Under Armour shirt and believing that the world doesn't need another capable apparel and footwear manufacturer. The world needs a hope and a dream. They need something to aspire to. When you know that you can have something as physical as like a shirt, that when I put this shirt on, like, I believe in my head that there's fundamental magic powers that exist in this shirt that are giving me some superpower to do something extraordinary that I could never do on my own. Like, that little bit of a lift is what our brand is meant to be for. And whether it's somebody trying to, make varsity, make the starting roster, maybe just that little girl, little boy, on their first day of school with a lunch tray and going, where am I supposed to sit? Like, I'm scared. But this morning I put my head through and my arms through this shirt and I felt that squeeze on my body, or I pulled this shoe on my foot, and like, I'm wearing Under Armour, and that's like they make magic, and they're giving me this superpower. Like, that gift, that inspiration, that what if Apple or Tesla made shirts and shoes? Like, I don't think our industry is sometimes, look, it's style, it's cool, it's all those things, but it is innovation. It is giving people, like, I don't know, is their shirt better than our shirt? Like, my shirt weighs 1.5 pounds less than their shirt. we're building something which everything we make should have that component of special that goes into it.
And I understand from talking to those close to you, innovation and product is just kind of running through your mind constantly, and the rest of the day is going to be primarily forward-looking and future. But I have one more question, because you mentioned VF Corp. There were rumors, decade plus ago, that Nike was going to make a run at acquiring Under Armour. Did they ever reach out?
No. They just they like killing people sometimes. So,
by the way, you have said before they don't play fair. Why not?
Because they're a big company. Everybody has tools. Everybody has resources, and there's a lot of strengths to being a big company, and there's a lot of strengths to being a small company. We're sort of in this tween stage where I feel that we're more agile than the bigs, and we've got more resources than the smalls in our industry today, where people are coming from.
And what's your line? We're big enough to do anything, but not big enough to do everything.
Yeah, and that's it. Like, if we want to go sign an athlete, an asset, a league, we're a $5 billion-ish company with a $500 million marketing budget. That's a big enough budget to do anything. And what I hear from people more often, which stepping back into the CEO chair has been more about, is, boy, it doesn't feel like you guys are spending $500 million on marketing. And so, that's one of the big initiatives that I have this time around, is making sure that it really gets through, that we're not just showing up in sort of non-active aspects of the world of there's a passive Under Armour logo on a wall. If a bank could do the deal, we shouldn't do it, like a naming rights deal or things like that. We should be proactive. We should be living and breathing with our athletes, on body, working with cool and influence. And it's different today that the world works. It's not just about signing a team or signing an athlete, because Steph Curry winning another NBA championship doesn't mean that sales will skyrocket the next day. It all has to be part of a much bigger plan and a much bigger process, which is a long working process.
Speaking of marketing and Steph Curry, explain how Ken Bazemore helped you.
Yeah, he's instrumental. Well, if you want something, you don't always just have to go right at it. And so that's learning, from maybe being a little more like a blunt hammer, of learning how to have some tact. And so Steph Curry was this amazing number 7 draft pick, and he was on to his second or third year of his contract, and he was coming available with the Golden State Warriors. We had a guy who had a relationship that knew Steph but knew Ken. Ken was like a journeyman in the NBA, but ended up playing, 15, 16 years, made a ton of money. Ken happened to be Steph Curry's locker mate for the Warriors. And so in seducing Stephen, it wasn't just, let's send you a bunch of stuff, do you know us? It was like, well, how do we have our first handshake? So the first handshake was, let's sign the guy in the locker next to Stephen, and then we're going to overwhelm him with product. And Ken was like, a number 10, number 11 player, and Steph was starting for the Warriors.
And he was already annoyed by Nike's pitch to him, right?
Yeah. But so we just thought, well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to overwhelm Ken with service, with attention, with product. We'd send him a package like every day. He'd just get something else. Imagine Steph's like, man, those guys, they take care of you, huh? Yeah, they take care of me. Why they really take care of you? And Ken, you don't play that much either. Like, well, I wonder what it'd be like if I talked to them. And so it sort of like began the relationship, and there was a good relationship in place, but that got us in the door and got us our pitch and our first shot at Stephen. And then who put it over the edge was his daughter, Riley, actually.
What did he say about that?
Well, when he was coming down, we got into the conversations. Nike and Adidas were the two that he was contemplating. Ken helped us get Under Armour into the conversation with Stephen. And so when he was trying to make the call, I was like, all right, we got to pick a shoe brand. What do you want to do, Stephen? He's home with Aisha and his daughter, Riley, just at the time, and I think she was like 2 years old or so. And he's like sitting on the couch like this, and he had all 3 shoe boxes lined up on the coffee table. And he took a shoe out, and he had like a shoe sitting on each one of the 3 different shoe boxes. And one's orange, one's red, and ours is black. And he goes, which one do you think I should do? And so she turns around like a 2-year-old and wobbles over to the thing, and she picks up the Nike shoe. She looks at it, turns it backwards, throws it over her shoulder. She goes over, she picks up the Adidas shoe. She looks at it, turns it over, throws it over her shoulder. Then she picks it up and she turns around and she goes, here, Daddy, this one. And so Riley Curry is the reason that Under Armour was able to sign with Stephen. So.
Okay, tough point in the relationship. 2018, I think you and your then president and COO travel west to convince Steph not to leave the brand. Take me into that meeting and what's discussed.
Culture, love, relationship, personality. You know, the brand was getting punched from a couple different angles, and Stefan was in. You know, he was a great partner. We went in there and we broke bread and we had a conversation, said what we would like to do, but that was a generation of Curry brand. And you know, there's not an athlete in the world that doesn't say, you know, or a phone call from an agent that I get, which are typically the eye rolls of, okay, get ready for it. I want you to sit down, but we want to do something innovative, whatever, whether it's a film project, whether it's an athlete, whether it's an asset. But we'd like to create something kind of like what Jordan brand is for Nike. And you're like, yeah. Everybody wants to build the next Jordan brand. It's very difficult to do, though. Our commitment to doing that with Stefan has been an endeavor of love and learning and knowing just how much you just have to be resilient, of just staying and sticking with it just over and over and over again.
And I was going to say, going into that meeting, I think you're annoyed that he's not wearing enough Under Armour product to games. He's annoyed that his shoes aren't selling as well as he'd like. As you're thinking about how you game plan that meeting, what's going through your head, and then like how do you solve it when you're actually in that situation? Because you know, this is just one example. I'm sure these sorts of things come up all the time when you're.
Yeah, there's a human dynamic in everything. A bathroom break at the appropriate time as well, just like cool things down, like make sure everybody can voice. But
and you're conscious of that.
Yeah, but this is like any athlete relationship is always about people want to be heard. You know, I'm not just some gimmick, some slogan, but I'm a person. So like my culture, my brand, my personality have to be a part of that. So it's critical that we have that. We're in the dawn of the Lake Tahoe tournament where, you know, Stefan shows up every year and he's like best in class and has the dreams of, you know, playing on the at least the senior tour someday, I think, is he is that good. But it was like Curry Golf was a part of it. You know, what we do with Curry Women's, what we do with Curry Kids, you know, how we make him the ambassador, you know, like and having an interaction like that, like taking him to Asia last year, it was extraordinary. You know, we had a 4-city tour over 6 days that was planned. It turned into a 3-city tour because we showed up at one of the cities and they said, I'm sorry, but you can't come here, Mr. Curry. We said, well, why not? He said, because your hotel, the Ritz-Carlton, there's 8,000 people that are waiting for you to get there. Every room is rented. There's people just riding the elevators up and down. And like the phenomenon that he creates is something which is extraordinary. And so, you know, that's our obligation, is to make sure that we can do a good job of harvest that love that people have of something that's so pure, which is the stroke of Stephen Curry, which there's just nothing else like it.
What lessons have you learned from kind of the uniqueness of that partnership, and how do you get it to where you'd like it to be long term?
Yeah. Any one of our relationships is something which is meant to be authentic, right? It has to be like felt. You know, we've been doing this a long time and we work in a competitive industry. There's a lot of brands that compete that try to make their version of what's the next great sports brand, or I have the next great basketball shoe. And that's why, you know, having an ambassador like Steph and having a product team and the innovation team like what we have. Curry Flow is something we'll show you later today, but the stickiness of the innovation or technology that exists in that shoe, it's second to none. And it's part of what helps create the separation or the stopping power between Stefan and his opponents, which is something which is, you know, what our brand is meant to do, is help give you that little nub, that little edge that just allows you to be a little bit faster, a little bit stronger, maybe fight a little bit longer.
I want to talk to you about your personality. I was reading one of your friends that was quoted saying, I mean, they remember you being intimidating, having a fiery demeanor, competitive, back to when you were in 5th grade. But how about the ways in which you think you're difficult?
Certainly patience has been something. You know, I want to think about things like even having this conversation of like, so what is that energy in the room like? Like, how do you introduce it? Because I'm a lot.
What does that mean to you?
I've got a point of view. You know, I don't walk in a room and just say it's lovely to be here. I'm looking around and going, it's a really nice room. But, you know, they should have had a second shade on that blind, and it should be something that could be closed right now. You're thinking like, here's the 5 or 10 things that are wrong with the 90 things that are great. It doesn't mean that you have to be mindful of that you can't become, you know, so analytical or make sure that it's not perceived as anything other than, I just want it to be the best. And that's sort of that, that aspiration that EUA has, is that our job is to, we say we haven't built our defining product as a brand, and it's looking and going like, well, what makes like.
And that's your mantra.
Yeah. I mean, that's given information. I mean, our vision, our mission statement now is, provide you the performance solutions that you never knew you needed. And then once you try them, you're wondering like, how did I ever live without this? And it's like, oh my gosh, like what did the world do before, stretch and microfiber and moisture management, like all these great things that now exist that we take for granted. But Under Armour created that. The term performance apparel was coined by our brand when I, had to make a filing at the Patent and Trademark Office, which was, here's the name, it's called Under Armour. And they're like, great. My friend Pat Herson, who was worked with the Patent and Trademark Office and had a firm that did all of our licensing, and an awesome guy. But I was like, great, I'm going to file this trademark for you for the word Under Armour.
Talked to him yesterday.
Yeah, cool, great guy.
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to file this trademark for the word Under Armour. And he's like, great, you need to have a specific with a generic. I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, well, you can't just say, Coca-Cola has to be Coca-Cola beverage or soda pop. It's like everything. So it had to be Under Armour, and it was like athletic apparel. I was like, athletic apparel? Something didn't fit about that. And so like, we're gonna go with performance apparel. I was like, performance apparel? It sounds like a set of street tires. Like it didn't really register with people. But coining that phrase, Under Armour performance apparel, it was much bigger than a t-shirt. It's become an entire industry that's led to pants and shirts and jackets, and just a mantra that why do we just allow non-performance from our apparel? Because we expect it in our footwear, which is where our industry had been focused, I think, prior to Under Armour coming along, which is why that was our ticket that got punched that allowed us to sort of get to the next level, was that we basically said we're going to take the entire space of apparel and we're going to focus on making everything there actually do something to enhance the performance of an athlete.
All right, wait, I want to get back to you though, because I'm curious kind of your thoughts on your personality and kind of what makes you tick and all of that. If somebody was evaluating you who knew you well and said, these are where I think there's most opportunity for improvement, what do you think they'd say?
I can be relentless, in getting on an idea, if I believe it's the right idea. But I'm a big believer that the best idea wins. Like this isn't how do we run around and push my idea. I mean, I've got 2 products I'm most excited about now, which is our Stealth Form Uncrushable hat, our new No Way backpack, and these are things that came through our incredible team. Like I want to make sure there's a difference between running your idea versus running like a great idea.
What does relentless look like for you?
I'm not a big sleeper. I'm an average golfer at best, like a 13-ish, 14-ish, probably more on that side. But I'm a great guy to play golf with. I hit it hard. I play fast. I tell pretty good stories because I'm well traveled, and I get what's happening. But I like that aspect of relentless is meant to be it's what it takes for business. The word relentless or the word resilience are probably maybe 2 of them. We're celebrating our 20th year as a public company this November. We'll celebrate our 30th year in business in August of next year. In order to have that kind of consistency, continuity, that's something that needs to be shaped and harvested. And so what I'm trying to bring is having this sort of 5-year break in the midst of my CEO tenure at Under Armour is to make sure that I was reflective enough, because some of the people you talk to are maybe in month 14 of being back in the chair, 15 of being back in the chair, really having the opportunity to start expressing like, so what are the things that you've learned? Because look, Relentless works. Relentless got Under Armour built the first time. It got us to $5 billion. But understanding what that means and maybe being able to apply a little bit of wisdom and just like, pushing and going as hard as you can isn't always the right answer, but it's being able to develop a little bit of stroke. It's being able, to not just be the one that's pushing and trying to make the sale, but maybe, take the glasses, tip it to the edge of the nose a little bit and just be like, let me be thoughtful and reflective on what we want to do. So I feel like adding that balance or that range to what my persona or my personality has been, it means relentless is probably still there. It means being a really good listener. It means having the ability to be a little more patient. I described our go-to-market calendar of 18 or 20 months, better said as forever. It feels like, forever from now. And we're working on, spring 27, fall 27 right now. And like the thing of wanting to fix things when they're broken or they're not working as well or optimized where they can be, that's something for me that, I'm proud of being able to bring that, in this chapter, being a really good listener, sitting down and making sure that people are actually heard, because that input can come from anywhere. Now, it needs to be driven by someone with a point of view. But the inputs that go into that, they have to be fair, because I don't own all the best ideas. And what I've learned this time around as well, there was certainly a lot of force of nature that went into the first chapter. And that wasn't just myself, that was my partners, Ryan, it was my partner, Kip, the way that we approached it. How long are we working today? I don't know, about 10 minutes longer than you. And so, pulling, 1 or 2 all-nighters in a week was not it, but that's what it takes to crack through in a industry that my first trade show was the Super Show in Atlanta with 13,000 exhibitors, every one of them trying to become the next Nike. And for some reason, we were able to break through. It's because it was personal. It did matter. It was the cash coming from my credit cards. It was our reputations on the line. And so I think that built into a bit of the DNA that's Under Armour. And so I want those two things to reflect. I want my personality or my brand with all of my strengths, and frankly, being able to be aware of all those weaknesses and vulnerabilities and other things, as I said, of making those the strengths today.
I think at one point in time you went to an executive coach. What did that entail, and what did it teach you?
Oh, I have a coach today.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
So, in what ways does that help?
It's phenomenal. I mean, the approach is not like, okay, here's what we're going to do with the tactics of business. It's beautiful. It focuses more on how do we create love? What are you trying to do? You're trying to go in there and show everybody that you have the right answer? Or do you want to inspire them to do something great? And so somebody's got to call the ball on where we're going, how we're going to get there, the best tools to get there as well. Those are the kind of things that you're leaning on your team, that you're making sure that it's their voices that are coming through. It's a much more evolved, better sense of understanding is that, look, myself, the brand, anybody is certainly a work in process, which I've been a part of that journey for a long time. And so I did get lucky. But as Chichi Rodriguez used to say, the harder I work, the luckier that I would get. And so I still believe in that work ethic and that belief in doing it, but it's working a little smarter. I wouldn't manage hard work in terms of the number of hours as much as I would of the productivity and the output.
And what does working smarter look like?
Measuring 3 times and cutting once, versus measuring twice. The Under Armour story is one where we were fortunate enough to enjoy this trajectory of growth where, is the curve, the slope looks like this. Where we're consistently just, growing at 20% a quarter on a regular basis. And the good news is that I have the blueprint of what built that, but now doing it through a lens, which is a way for us to, as I like to say, pour concrete this time, and ensure that those lessons are sustainable. And that's why a lot of the additions we've made, especially our brand president, who was hired, just about a year ago, and Eric Lidke, he had a mandate, and he had a brand president, means he's responsible for all of our brand and all of our product.
A former Adidas guy.
Yeah, and Eric had spent 26 years at Adidas. He was the first guy to hold that job, an American, a non-German, to hold that job for Adidas when he was there. And he started in 13 and from Boost and NMD and Yeezy and all these great things that Eric did there. Having him be able to come here and apply that lesson, it's like leaning on someone. But bringing Eric to run brand and product for Under Armour, the mandate was simple. It was, number one, we have a $500 million marketing budget. Find us $100 million. Find us 20% of that we can use to be really agile with, to really go tell our story. Number 2 is write the strategic business plan. You've seen what it looks like at the bigs. You've studied it. You've been around it. This isn't work for an outside accounting firm. I believe that you can outsource your cost cutting. I don't believe you can outsource your strategy. And so Eric has been pulling all these pieces together into one concise document that we have that now is explainable for everybody to understand. And number 3 was to help us build the operating model, because it's the most complicated thing about running a global business. We've got more than 2,000 retail stores around the world, 16,000 people doing business in 156 countries. And every one of them right now is at that moment like, are they about to grow? Are we about to get there? So the way that you work with the global dynamics of product or marketing and the way that you pop into the regional approach between, we have 3 regions with Asia Pacific, EMEA, and the Americas. And so each one of them has their own leaders. And so you're in a matrix environment. I think about when, I do believe in micromanagement at certain levels. I think it's totally underestimated.
So I was going to ask you about that.
Without question.
Explain your view on, because you struck me as somebody, or from what I've read, that you're willing to. I mean, micromanaging is something that.
Yeah, I want to get it right. I want to get the, I want us to build the. I think there's too much lost on pretense or structure or process. Like, that's great, but the right answer will save us a lot of time. And so I think in an industry like ours, especially as competitive it is too, we have a process. But I believe life is mostly about an 80-20 rule, and being able to build into like what that 80-20 rule, looks like, is that we do need process, we do need structure in place, but we also need to build in the fact that the market's not going to wait 18 months for all of our products, and so we need the speed of market. We need to be able to get things to market, in 12 months, 9 months, 6 months, if the product's ready, if the store can get on board. And that shouldn't feel like a burden or a weight. It should feel like it's part of our process, is that we plan for 80, 85, 90% of our business to be set and structured, and then we plan for this 10%. We plan for these free days. We plan for ourselves just to be able to think a little bit. I mean, the dynamic where Under Armour is today, is that it's interesting. We have a guy who's running Asia Pacific for us, who's been in our industry for a long time. And he said, he goes, I get what's happening. Coming in, he's a year or so in, he's like, I now understand the brand. You guys were a brand who then became a company. And now we want to become a brand again. And I don't think I could explain it any more simply than that, is that, when you look at we need the structure, we need the process, we need all those things, but that can't be dominating us, is that world-class financials don't lead to world-class brands. World-class brands lead to world-class financials. And this isn't some subtle way of me nodding at Wall Street and saying, don't worry, the earnings won't come.
Yeah.
It's a very intentional approach to saying, like, the blueprint for brand is something that Under Armour effectively wrote in our first chapter. Now, we did it with a lot of sort of that unbridled, freshness of growth. Well, now we're a bit of a known quantity. And what's interesting about our brand is that nobody's mad at us. They just haven't heard from us in a long time. So we want to make sure that we do have that, I wouldn't say the first handshake, because many people, we've got good awareness. They're aware of us. But this next handshake we have with them, we want it to feel different. It's like when you're asking about some of my personality traits, it's like, I want it to be an evolved personality. I don't want to be I don't expect to be that kid at 25. I'm a father of 21 and an 18-year-old too. So being an example to them, and modeling the behavior that I expect my teammates to live by, my employer, my partners, our vendors, and other people. I hold them accountable, and they hold me accountable too.
I want to ask you a little bit about the period where you weren't CEO, but you just mentioned being the father of an 18 and 21-year-old. You talk about being lucky with Under Armour, super lucky with family as well. Before we get to kids, your wife, DJ. Explain just the role she played early on in the company.
I mean, she's awesome. She built, I'd say free labor. It would cost me dinner. It would cost me dinner after Valentine's Day and staying up for 3 days in a row.
Pat was telling me yesterday about how you were butt dialing him repeatedly back in the day when you were out hawking roses on the street with DJ, and he was listening to you guys like game plan how to sell the last whatever number of roses.
So that 1,186 dozen flowers I described was meant to be 1,500 dozen. Yeah. Watching 314 dozen die on me wasn't an option. And so I had one of the guys in my senior year when I said, we're going to blow it out this year. I'm going to make all this money. I've got this idea for Under Armour. I'm going to use the seed money to start the company. And we did. I ended up making about $16,000, but it should have been closer to $35,000. But I had a couple guys that were selling like stands that didn't have permits, and so like people shut them down. So I'm at the house, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's February 14th. I've been up all day. And somebody comes back and there's like another 200 dozen flowers that we have. They're just sitting there. I'm watching them, they're just gonna wilt and die. So I was in Georgetown, Wisconsin, and basically take my car right by the Exorcist steps in Georgetown as you come off a Key Bridge, back to my Ford Explorer down to the bottom, load it with as many boxes of flowers as I could. At 4 o'clock or 4:30 in the afternoon, rush hour, was just stopped, grabbed roses and just started walking up and down and was selling flowers. Apparently I butt dialed Pat. And so he's got like this 25 minutes somewhere on the bridge of like, roses for your wife, $30. I could do 20, right? 15, you got the cash now. Give me 2 dozen for 30, And it was just working it the whole time. So he says he has this voicemail somewhere.
And that's when it was expensive to call anybody.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It probably cost me more for the phone call than the flowers actually netted me by the end of that.
How about what you've learned about yourself through marriage?
Oof. It's a partnership. Right? And you're in this corporation of life that's meant to be built on love, number one. But you've got a job to do and you've got a responsibility. And that's to raise these incredible kids and giving them the best you can, the best thinking that we have. You learn trust, you learn sadness, you learn strength, you learn how to be smart. You learn that you're not invincible. And it's good to have somebody who's rooting for you. It's good to have your team. I think about, family like, it's everything. But then you think about these other concentric circles. And I think about, many of the athletes that we get to live with and deal with. And they expect us to be one of those concentric circles. Like, here's my high school friends, here's my college friends. You've got the circle, maybe a church or whatever your religion following is. You've got this people that you go to a book club with, and you got your friends from work. And for consumers, you're like, yeah, I'm an Under Armour gal. I'm an Under Armour guy. They'll say one of the other brands, but like, that's what we're doing. We're building community. The lessons of family is a word that I say easily move to business. You have to be careful with that because you are running a business. But it should feel like a family environment. Everybody knows that they have to contribute to that family as well. And that it's like being on a team. It's that you don't have to be great every day because nobody is. It's not possible. But you got to be great a lot more days than you do. I call it deposits and withdrawals. You're coming in today. Great thing about being a team, I could start my own company. I could go to somebody else. You could, but it's a really lonely place to be. And knowing that some days you need to come in, it's like, yeah, we expect you to deposit when you come into work and you give your best effort and you input that. But we also recognize there's some days where it's like, my dog's sick. I'm having trouble with my partner. My kid's not doing well in school. There's some days you do need to take. And that's what being a part of our community, it's what working at UA, being on our team is like. And hopefully we give that same sense of comfort or stability or security to people when they wear our brand, to know that it's something better.
How about the hardest part of being a parent?
Oof. It's complicated. I've got 2 great kids. I got a son who's a junior at the University of Southern California, and I get to live vicariously through him. And watching his journey and watching him grow up has been awesome. Of coming from a boy graduating high school into becoming a man. My daughter teaches me lessons every day. Number one is that she's not going to wear Under Armour just because Dad works there. Like I gotta earn it. And these are the reminders that we have in what we do each and every day, because I do want to impress them. I do want them to fall in love, and I do think about what they can give me back. But I think understanding empathy has been important. Like understanding this consumer today. Our target demo is 16 to 24 years old, and having 2 kids that sit in the center of that. That both played high school sports, that understand athletics and athletes and mindset and sort of culture of where it is today. It's incredibly instructive. It makes, dinner conversation, it may be a little, UA-centric. And I want to make sure that it's not just asking about them for me, but it's asking about them for them. And I guess if I had to, from parenthood to my time away from the CEO chair, to being able to bring back this incredible sense of empathy.
I was talking to Maryland's Governor Moore yesterday about you, and he said he's kind of leaned on you in figuring out how to be a public parent. And then we get into just, talking about kids a little bit. And I'm curious, because of your success, you have the ability to create endless opportunities for your kids.
Yeah.
How do you figure out what the balance is between that and doing it in a way that avoids dampening motivation?
Affluenza. You want to be careful of allowing that ever to sink in.
And how do you do it?
You don't shy away from it. I spent a lot of time, being a part of raising my family, our family in a town like Baltimore, being able to have our kids grow up through what I always wanted to just be this very clear lens. You have to be careful, is because they do have the opportunity to do a lot of different things. And there's two ways to take that. There's a kid that could be, look what I have and be smug, be that guy, that gal that nobody likes. I've tried to do it just by maybe introducing or showing them to some of the best. Like when you do meet, be it a Stephen Curry or a Tom Brady or a Jordan Spieth, there's such an intensity with the intentionality they have. This is one thing I think this might be news breaking, but anybody you speak to that has dealt with celebrity at the highest levels, or better said than celebrity excellence, those that are great, is they have the ability to just lock into you. When you talk to these guys, it's like, hey, how you doing? And it's an uncomfortable amount of time. Am I really, I'm right here and I'm present and I'm here for you the entire time. If there's nothing else that exists in the world, I'm just focused on you. I think it's probably a pretty good rule for life, is that being present is something that I always, if people ask for give me, what are keys to success? It's it's not being the person at the party who's looking over the shoulder and trying to find somebody else, but being right here. It's not being, I'm above this, I'm too big for this. I'm here right now, so I'm going to engage in whatever that activity is. I think that my kids have done an awesome job. They got a great group of friends, and it's certainly not perfect. My daughter, I'm looking forward to her being able to start university and be able to, start a brand new chapter too, because it's one thing that from having gone to 3 different high schools, I feel at each one of those stages I was able to reintroduce myself. I remember able to take, whether it was a roommate or an experience I had with somebody, and maybe I wouldn't give them credit at the time, but I maybe would take some of those skills from one high school and I try to apply it to myself, being a better roommate, being neater at Maryland, cleaning yourself up, the hyper learning I know that I went through from 14, 15, 16 years old to becoming that next person that I wanted to be, an incredibly important journey. My kids have done an awesome job at it too, but like all of us, they are works in process too, and so they're not going to be perfect, but we're going to love them no matter what.
The time you weren't CEO, I kind of went through and tried to pick out the toughest quote I could find to then kind of get your thoughts on it. September 2024, the Wall Street Journal writes, more than half a dozen former executives said Plank was responsible for much of the turmoil and complexity that he's now promising to clean up. In recent years, they say he foiled marketing plans put in place by others, pushed product ideas that flopped, blurred the lines between his brand role and that of the CEOs who succeeded him. Your thoughts?
What a crazy journey life is. And so everybody's got an opinion. And the reality from where people will feel are always going to be divergent. And so I don't like our stock price right now. Our shareholders sure don't like our stock price right now. What we're doing about that is creating seismic change. And it's building off the assets we have. By seismic change, I don't mean it's not how do we just start over, but it is certainly a turnaround. Since really probably 2019 or so, you've seen when I left the CEO chair at the end of 19, our stock was in a very different position. Coming back in, it was not quite the size where it is now. And the ambition we have is not looking and trying to point fingers, because this isn't about diagnosing the problem. We know what the issue is. Purchase power is important for us. Making kids fall in love with us, making that 16 to 24-year-old demographic love UA is the number one ambition that we have. And the one thing about finding success, being able to like, crack to the next level, is that you're always going to have critics, especially when you have a public stock. It doesn't make anyone right, it doesn't make anyone wrong, but like you have to listen to it. Some of the best advice that I've ever had was actually somebody who was in the public scene or the public picture, and I'd asked Jeff Bezos from Amazon. In like 2014 or so, they were getting hit on all these same topics. You're a big company, you're in culture, and this isn't saying anything other than just like, what's some of the best advice you've heard of like how to deal when people want to take shots?
And by the way, I can tell when even just reading that, it bothers you.
Well, any criticism is going to bother anybody. If you didn't, you weren't human. Like to find, I said, hopefully I can bring some of this to my next chapter of what it feels like. What I'd say about, he said, whenever you get criticism, I said, what do you do? Because you guys are getting hit on like, the culture's bad. And when people say that, it's like, can you talk about that? It's an organization of 16,000 people. Of course, there's going to be bad interaction, but like the standard, the culture, the worst behavior we'll tolerate is something I think that would be an aspiration anywhere. And I'm really proud of that. But like the advice that I got is that when you hear criticism, I said, what do you do? When all this criticism, they're always writing bad stories about you, and how do you keep up with it? How do you process it? The answer was, the first thing I do is I ask myself if it's true. Like think about that, where you sit back and from being defensive, and you're like, I can see your body language that bothers you. Is like, yeah, of course it does. Like this is talking about the brand is a...
And your baby.
Yeah, of course it's a baby, but you want to be great. You want to do the best you can, but you're never going to get great unless you do quality control, unless you sit back and watch tape and figure out what you could do better. Like the only thing that matters right now is that we do it in a team, we treat our team fairly, we treat our consumers and do the best we can with innovation for making the best products in the world, and doing it in a culture that everybody's really proud of. There's no room or acceptance for some of the things that have been said, and if there's a company that's been vetted, so opinions, and let's take everything at face level, maybe they're right. Well, we've been vetted. We've been through 6+ years of SEC investigation. Like, we've lived through this process, and there's nothing but a really proud company who's ready to get on doing exactly what it's the best in the world at, and that's making the world's best performance apparel, footwear, and accessories for consumers to just make them just a little bit better, a little bit faster, jump a little higher, run a little faster.
When you hear some of the like industry analysts that came out when you came back saying, how can this guy help fix the problems he helped create, you think what?
I think work on the brand that was created by a team of people that I was lucky enough to be able to pull together and pull through.
Yeah.
At the end of 2019, I stepped down from the CEO chair. My son was starting high school, was finished freshman year. My daughter was beginning in going into junior high. I finally wanted the chance to be able to actually speak to my kids, watch my kids play sports. And we were just getting a lot of heat from a lot of different places. There was no pressure. This is totally voluntary in order to make a decision.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm open. I want the best. I'm a fiduciary for our shareholders. I want the best thing for the company. If there's a better path that would work, I'd be more than in favor of it. And so that's when I said, okay, let's let somebody else do it, and I'll focus on family. I'll focus on watching my kids grow up. And I want to be helpful. I want to be added to the company. But being the CEO is very different from being a chairman. And making sure that people had the chance to be successful, that's incredibly important. And that may always be some he said, she said, but the only intent I would ever have is what's the best interest of the company.
But by the way, we did a filming with Howard Schultz, the Starbucks founder. We were with him in Italy and Seattle. Fascinating guy, similarly uber successful. And he talked about how, he famously left running the company, then came back a few times, and how it was just challenging for him watching somebody else, run it. Governor Moore was telling me yesterday, conversations with you, you didn't fully appreciate kind of that challenge. Like, take me into that period and just what's that like?
It doesn't have a sense of, oh my gosh, how are they making this choice?
Yeah.
I really just want Under Armour to win.
Yeah.
Like, I guess I want to make sure that, like, that's clear. Now, people can question and saying, well, that's not helpful for it, or that's not additive to it. You know, in my time off, I put myself in basically a product role where it was, I stepped down at the end of 19. In March 16th of 2020, the pandemic hit. And so first thing I did is went to work on building the Under Armour sports mask. We ended up selling close to 20 million of these things, you know, which is one of the things that allowed us to stay in business, to keep our cash position high, to keep things running. You know, getting engaged in product is, it's my love, it's my passion, but like someone else running the day-to-day administrative is that I'm never opposed to someone else running I honestly, I'm not opposed to someone else running the company if we were doing really well. Right now, where we are, I'm the right person at the right time to lead this company. How long is that? A year, 2 years, 3 years? Like, we're gonna flip backs like cornhole style. We're not trying to throw, you know, mile-long passes. We're gonna keep everything very reasonable of just making little tosses and just make sure that every day is better than the one in front of it.
What would you like it to be?
I'd like it to be number one on every kid's Christmas list this holiday. I'd love it to be the earnings and the bottom line and the pricing power that would really come with this brand. I think we have an innovation story that is just like one of the best kept secrets in the world. I don't think we've done a great job telling the story of this brand. And there's so much good. And so the ability for someone, don't believe everything you read. But there's always truth within all of that. And that's one thing is what I said is that I'll read and evaluate everything and says like, is it true? Is there something we can do better there? Because I am a constant work in process. Like all of us, all we want to do is be the best versions of ourselves, but we're better than that. You know, this is a brand that has broken through to play at the highest levels of competition, competing with the biggest brands in sports. Now it has smaller brands coming after us as well. You know, we can argue or someone could say, or who's the best person for it? Well, I'm in the chair. And so I get the privilege to run this company. And I got a pretty good point of view with 30 years of experience in this industry and 15 of them as a public company CEO. That's pretty unique and something which I think will play to our benefit in years to come.
What do you think the best lesson is that you learned from kind of the tough period?
Forgive yourself, right? Stop trying to be perfect. You're not going to make everybody happy.
Because at the time you beat yourself up when...
Yeah, and you're saying, what could we have done? What would have happened better that way? You know, the best thing that I think I can bring to this job or the experience that I have, you know, is that entrepreneur mindset of like, it doesn't matter what you had. Like this is, every day I come to work and you start over as, old example, MacGyver. You know, I'll take whatever, let's take all the toys we have, lay them on the table and say, what are the ones that are best going to help us accomplish the mission for the day? And make sure we have those pieces in place.
Did I read correctly, you use a BlackBerry example in meetings on occasion?
Yeah, but it was more relevant when BlackBerry was it in 2006, 15 or 16 and saying, like they became complacent. They stopped innovating. They thought that they had everything fixed. And the one thing that is true in our world, especially in sports and culture and athletes and trend and all these things that matter, is that the world's going to keep moving. It's going to move at a really fast rate. And so the speed at which we can never be satisfied. Complacency is one of the most dangerous things. It's the, you know, you want to be careful of internal fighting. You want to be careful of complacency. Is that this organization needs to think about what the next chapter looks like because we're not where we want to be right now. And the team that we're putting in place is one that understands that. And the team that's existing there isn't like we're getting, you know, get rid of the team. No, let's inspire the team. Let's empower the team. Let's give them the tools they need to be successful. That's what the next chapter for us looks like.
And in fairness, you're a competitive guy. You're probably never going to be where you want to be because you're always going to be looking towards how you know, drive stuff forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll feel some of that, but again, hopefully, you know, God forbid in this next chapter, I'm able to bring some wisdom into it. You know, I'm not the 35-year-old guy who's just charging down the hill. And, you know, it's a difficult thing about whether it's criticism or anything else. I've been in the same place-ish for 30 years, right? It's not like I moved from 7 different jobs and you're trying to find other sources like, oh yeah, the Under Armour guy. So that's going to have its advantages and it's going to have its disadvantages. The advantages really outweigh the disadvantages a lot. And that doesn't mean that people aren't going to be able to take pop shots or say things about you, and some of which may be true in its own light. But it doesn't mean that the intention or the love or the respect, more importantly, just like the standard. The standard. So we've been through it. So like I've been tested.
Yeah.
Like I've been tested a lot. It doesn't mean like, oh, poor Kevin. I'm not expecting that. I'm not asking for that. But like, I don't know. I've earned the right to be in this chair today.
Well, and frankly, you've always put your money where your mouth is, and you've taken more risk than anybody.
Sure.
How challenging does the current tariff environment make things?
It's just uncertainty, you know. Rising tide raises all boats, and the lowering tide does the same. And so we're in an industry with what we pay for a sneaker is going to be the exact same duty that somebody else trying to compete with us in this country. So that'll be a fair playing field. We just want to know what the rules are. And so that's something of given, let's give ourselves the time for that information to come out, but we don't know what it'll be.
How do you view tariffs?
I mean, we just want to know where it is. I mean, I want to make sure that we can lock in what the appropriate, just what pricing will be. That's the one thing for our shareholders is that, you know, we had a great plan coming out of last year and planning into the year. And so tariffs is going to put a little bit of a wrinkle into that. And so let's find out what that means. But as of today, nobody knows anything.
By the way, a great quote I found that I think ties into the revitalization of Baltimore, but I think connects kind of nicely to tariffs and actually give you a lot of credit for it. This was from a number of years ago. You said, we have 250,000 people making Under Armour something at any given moment. In the next 3 years, we'll add another 200,000 plus. And 0 of them are pegged to come back to the US because we're all chasing cheap labor all over Malaysia and the far corners of the earth. It's a crime. We couldn't find a way to get 1,000 jobs back here, or 5,000 jobs, or 10,000 jobs. When you look at what's happening in Ferguson, what's happening in Baltimore, it's jobs. We need jobs, and we're shedding all our jobs to other places. The ability for us to bring that back, that's the big idea.
Yeah.
Well, that was interesting.
Well, that was from a speech opening our Project Glory, which is when we'd spent, as I said, the first 6 years of the company manufacturing exclusively in the United States. And I mentioned the garment district that today we're 50% of our production in the US is like, again, today less than 1. It doesn't exist. We've been working at this for a long time. It doesn't take the administration or anyone else to say, wouldn't it be great if we had manufacturing here?
What's the practical solution, you think, to all this?
Well, we tried it. I guess that's where I'd start from, is that we could take a new tack, but we basically viewed like without government subsidy, actually making a profitable product, because, you know, if you put, the way our business works, if we're going to sell let's call it a shoe for $100, it means that the shoe costs $100 at retail, it means we sell it to a wholesaler at $50, we make the shoe for effectively half of that price, $25. So basically new tariffs add any amount of money. So if that tariff, if the dollar amount goes from 25 to costing us 35, it's now a $35 cost shoe. That means we sell it to our wholesale partner at 70, and they're reselling that product for $140. That delta between the two of them, that's what the consumer will be paying. We've tried running this play in the United States. Not to say it's impossible, but we couldn't make it work.
Because the consumer doesn't want to pay more.
Well, the consumer's not going to pay more. Made in the USA, we haven't seen it have the net effect, but that's not an absolute statement either. There's places for it, and there's pockets for it. There's places that we absolutely can, and so this will be in partnership with our state, local, and federal officials of finding out like what's the best way. Because look, everybody wants jobs here, but these are tough jobs. That it's a generational and a cultural thing in order to get back in it. And you really have to commit, like towns have to commit to, we're going to be a manufacturing town.
On that front, I want to just speak to your efforts in terms of the revitalization of Baltimore. And I thought it'd be a good kind of closing topic for the sit down today. Like, what's been your motivation for doing all this?
God gave me a lot. You know, I'm incredibly grateful for that. And, you know, sitting on a beach somewhere didn't feel like the right way to sort of pay it forward. And so my ambition was, you know, around 2006, 2007, we were too big to move anywhere. We love this city. I love the identity of grit that it gave to this brand. And this ambition that I'd had is that I get it. There's something that says, if you make it in life, the cool kids, I'll meet you in LA, I'll meet you in New York. I was like, that's one thing. But what if instead we made them all have to come to us? Like, what if we made and helped build on a city standpoint, the next Portland, the next Austin, the next Nashville. And I look at this Northeast corridor, I look at this city 30 miles from DC, 2 hours and 12 minutes on the Acela train to New York, and I'm like, there's something awesome here. There's a grit, there's a culture, but it's an incredible place to live. The quality of life is extraordinary. And I'm like, I think you could tell that story. And being able to anchor it with the coolest athletic brand in the world that would be based here. And if it was visible from 95, and that created this ambition called Baltimore Peninsula, which is something that now anchors our new headquarters building we just moved into about 6 or 7 months ago. And it's been incredible. It is meant to be the living physical manifestation of walking into a sports brand. We're unfortunately a city that is too often taxed by the HBO miniseries that appeared more than 20 years ago that people are like, oh yeah, I know that city. That's not the vision that we have. And I think there's something that's very much in place, especially what's happening today, because the cool kids, the new kids, the great ones, they're calling us, they want to be a part of this brand.
Governor Moore and I were talking about this a bit too yesterday, in that there seems to be a level of cynicism when somebody of note steps forward with a community idea, regardless of how amazing it might be, almost puts a target on your back. And I'm wondering, what's that been like for you? Well,
one of the things I believe in is keeping the main thing the main thing. I'm in a clearing my line item list mode today, because I've done a lot of interesting things, from horse racing to a whiskey business to hotels where we're sitting right now to these really neat things. But keeping the main thing is what my number one focus and priority is right now. And it's not even like, is it distracting to me or is this something else? But the way it makes other people potentially feel.
Jack, the former Notre Dame athletic director I was talking to yesterday, said even if for no other reason than perception is distraction, like you're like, screw that. Even I want these assets, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, the most important things in my life are my family, my friends, and this brand. And making sure that there's no question on any of that. And so putting all of my priority and energy, apparently I got to beat some old headlines down. It's not worth it. It's not worth the energy. And so removing any of that fuel from other places and leaving that, with myself, I own it, and that's it. But ultimately, I'm responsible. And I not only accept that, I thrive on that.
I want to bring it back to Baltimore. You just get word that the 7-acre parcel that you'd been eyeing for the new Under Armour headquarters isn't going to work out. How much of your own money do you spend over the course of the following few years buying up how much land?
Yeah, it's 266 acres that was assembled for the Baltimore Peninsula project, and it has been an endeavor. I look at, some big visionaries. Disney had a massive vision. Like Las Vegas was built on the shoulders of big vision. What Sheikh Mohammed built in Dubai was an old fishing town, 40 years before, that he turned one day and said, what if there's a skyline right there? And I thought that kind of blind ambition was the things that it's what leadership requires. And something I took a lot of pride in. I felt like a responsibility.
Why?
Because I've been given so much. It's an endeavor where you do feel this obligation to give back, to participate with the community. And frankly, it's a worthy cause. Don't take away just this love and affection for the city of Baltimore as much as maybe just relate with your audience and saying, it's a love and affection for wherever you're from. How much do you love St. Louis? And you meet somebody from St. Louis and you just finished telling me why your next interview is so important to you, because you guys share the same zip code when you grew up. And there's something about that affinity. And there's something about, when you meet somebody who's from St. Louis, they tell you they're a Yankee fan. And you're like, oh, what, are you kidding me? I love where I'm from. People typically love where they're from, and I respect people that love and appreciate, respect and do the best they can for where they're from. And so I'm very proud of what that means. I'm fortunate enough to be the CEO of Under Armour because without UA being great, nothing else works. It's a requirement for it. And so that's why for me, I feel so blessed and honored and appreciative to have this opportunity, to run the company that I founded. But I don't walk in with an entitlement that says I have to be here. We have a chance of doing this with the city, but I'm not going to do it alone. I mean, the company's not going to do it alone. It's going to take an entire community. And so leaning on, the wings of this broader city is one of the calls to action that I always have. And if I could make this not just a Baltimore sentiment, but to anyone out there, it's like the public-private partnership, the ability for communities to work with companies. Like it's like reading a negative headline. There's no ambition that someone's trying to dupe someone over. And I'm sure there's bad actors in life, and we've seen it happen before, and there's the Enron stories of the world. But most people, I believe, and even getting in those small rooms that people are always curious, like, I'm not in the room when it happens, so I just don't trust. Trust is a very special thing. It's something that's actually built in drops and lost in buckets. Over a course of 30 years in a career, there's going to be times that you'll build on that trust. There'll be times that somebody says, you know what, you might have cost me something there. I can accept that. But all I can do is I can just go back to work and just show up again and just to start depositing one drop at a time. Baltimore, I think, is a bit of the resume that I put for this company of, don't just leave it about this city, but anybody's city. Is that, wouldn't you love to have someone who appreciates, respects, and works as hard for their community? Because I think that's one thing that we'll find is that it's pretty much unimpeachable that this brand loves this town. That I'm deeply committed to the place where the brand was, quote unquote founded, although we moved from DC to get here. But what we're building is really special, and I respect how unique that is and the opportunity we have for this next chapter. So, we've done a good job of covering the past, but we got a hell of a story to show you what's coming in the future.
How cool has it been for you to see third-party development now around the new campus? I mean,
it's a new energy that gets people to think differently, and it was so important was the co-location to 95. We live in a city who, unfortunately, a little more than a year ago, we watched the bridge that's named after the author of our national anthem crumble into, the Baltimore Harbor like a Rector set. What was pretty interesting is that 4 months later, we opened our brand new sparkling headquarters that's perfectly visible from 95, which used to host about 60 million cars a year. I haven't gotten the latest numbers yet, but I think it's got to be closer to 80 or 90 million a year. And when they drive through town, hopefully their thought isn't, oh yeah, remember that show, we're going through Baltimore, not that HBO thing. What was it called again? But they're just saying, oh look, there's the hottest, coolest sports brand in the world. Look, they're based right here. Must be an awesome place to live. If we do that, we're doing our job.
In what ways has Dan Gilbert been an example?
He's been an inspiration. He's a brilliant man. I think what he's done and given, and I maybe could have used it in Detroit, that, there's a great slogan that Dan's team came up with, which is say nice things about Detroit. And I'd encourage people as well, say nice things about Dan Gilbert. He's a very special man who cares at a deep level. And I think he had a blueprint for, imagine if you could take a company and based on our growth and our success, I can move that and I can base that in a downtown that was blighted and basically forgotten about. A lot of that ambition was the same, but it's different. So I don't know how this whole thing turns out, but I'm 30 years in and hopefully have several more years or decades, and I'm not declaring how long I'll be doing this, but we're going to get it right, that's for sure.
And lastly, independent of Under Armour, in terms of what you're doing with the development here, I mean, you're kind of building a neighborhood from scratch. I know you said you don't know where it'll end up, but what's your vision for that?
It was, again, when I drive north on 95, you drive through those places in Philly and you saw this old port industrial land off to the right-hand side, and you're like, why is that just port industrial? Like, man, that would make great living. And I looked in our own backyard, and as Under Armour was growing, I was like, we're expanding and we're going to need more room. We need more space. We're landlocked in the old location where we were. And it was like, imagine instead of us just finding just the best headquarters, let's still do the best thing for shareholders and always keep that in mind. But imagine if we could tie that to a bigger vision. Imagine if we could help change the perception of this town, because I believe that any brand, especially consumer-facing brands, aren't just going to be judged on, the consumer is going to judge them on like not only what they sell, but what they do for their community. And so that's where us being able to be a bit of this flag of saying, like, take another look at this town. And again, there's many Baltimores that are out there, but like I don't think that the world should live just somewhere between New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and maybe Miami or Dallas. Like I think that we should be bigger than Chicago, a 5 or 6 city town. Like I think that it's where our strength is, and look, this is where home is for us too, and we've got an awesome place that we're bringing families. So this is a recruiting video as much as anything, and whether you're zingers or not, hit me, but. We're ready to invite the best of them. Come join us on this mission. We got some pretty good ones who've picked up that challenge so far.
Thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Graham. Good to see you.